Good morning and welcome. You are listening to Tuesday's edition of Frankly Speaking Radio. I'm your host, Frank Whalen. Very excited to have you with us here today. It is Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2006, about 8:01 a.m. here in the Central Time Zone. We're not going to talk about lovey-dovey heart stuff. We're going to talk about some pretty important in-depth stuff, things that you and I certainly talk about on a regular basis on this program, and certainly things that we have all encountered to a certain degree in our respective courses of events and the things we do every day. The topic of our debate today is the Hispanization of America and the impact of legal and illegal immigration. I'll introduce our guests, and then we'll give them a few minutes each to talk about themselves before we get into the subject matter. Our first guest is the editor for American Renaissance. He's been on the program before. Please welcome him to the show, Jared Taylor. Jared, thank you for being here. And our second guest is the founder and director of the Pico Youth and Family Center in Santa Monica. Please welcome to the program, Oscar De La Torre. Oscar, welcome to the show as well.
Good morning.
Thank you both for being here. I very much appreciate it. I'll tell you what, Oscar, why don't you go ahead and tell a little bit about yourself. Give us like a minute or so of background on yourself and sort of your position on all this.
Okay. Well, good morning to all the listeners. My name is Oscar De La Torre, and here in California, Southern California, born and raised. And I'm a son of parents who immigrated to this country from Mexico. And I graduated from high school, was student body president at my high school, went on to college, and also served as student body president at my university, finished my master's degree. I came back to my community and founded a youth center. And I also serve on the school board here in my community.
Wonderful. Well, certainly an active member of the community, and that's important. You got to know what you're talking about. Jared Taylor, our other half of the debate here today. Jared, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I was actually born and lived in Japan until I was 16 years old. My parents were missionaries. After that, I went to Yale and got a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree in international economics from the Paris Institute of Political Studies in Paris. Since that time, I've done a number of things, but in 1989, I started a publication called American Renaissance that takes a particular interest in race and immigration. Mm-hmm. And I think that the question of immigration, particularly Hispanic immigration, is a very important one for the United States. It will affect the future in all sorts of ways. And I think that it's important to realize that the increased Hispanicization of the United States is something that the American people never voted for, and I think the huge majority have no desire to participate in. This is something that's been foisted on us by lax government, as well as at the same time being encouraged by Mexico.
Oscar, go ahead and jump in, my friend. I'm just here to make sure that nobody talks over each other, I guess. We want to make sure that all this content gets out.
Yeah, well, first of all, the whole concept of the Hispanization of the country is interesting. We need to remember, though, that the entire Southwest of the United States was founded by Mexicans, people of mestizo. They were, Mexicans are not one race. There isn't really a concept of racial identity in Mexico. But the people in Mexico who fought the Spaniards for more than 300 years and liberated the Southwest from Spanish rule are people that founded, that part of the country. And the first Constitution in the state of California was written in Spanish. The last governor of the state of California that was Mexican was actually an African Mexican, what we would call a mulatto.
If I can jump in, I'm sorry, sir. We're going to take a short break here, folks. Unfortunately, commercials just can't wait. We'll pick this up. Good morning, my friends, and welcome back to the big show. We call it Frankly Speaking Radio. Well into our debate format today, our two guests, Oscar De La Torre and Jared Taylor. I appreciate you both being here. Oscar, you were just referring a little bit to, I guess, the origins of the Southwest United States. Please continue.
Yeah, as I was stating, people of Mexican ancestry liberated the Southwestern United States from Spanish rule. And, Mexicans have made a tremendous contribution, to this country from its beginning, from its inception, and that's something that we all need to appreciate and appreciate that history. So I can understand Mr. Taylor saying that America's never voted for having so many people of Mexican ancestry or other Latin American countries residing in the United States, but these are people who are taxpayers. These are people who, were enfranchised by the American government because of the American government's expansionist policies into Mexico and still into Latin America, like Puerto Rico, for example.
Yeah. Jared, go ahead and respond.
The argument about the Mexican or Hispanic origins of the Southwest is always produced as a justification for the current Hispanicization of the United States. Whereas, of course, at the time of the Mexican-American War, there were only a few thousand Mexicans in that entire vast territory. It was practically uninhabited. At the same time, after that war, the United States paid Mexico for that territory, and the Mexicans accepted that money. Later, there was the Gadsden Purchase. Once again, Mexico accepted money from the United States government in return for territory. To say, therefore, that Mexico has some sort of moral claim to that part of the country is certainly wrong from any kind of legal or moral sense. However, in fact, 58% of Mexicans think that the border is illegitimate and that they have the right to come to the southwestern part of the United States anytime they like. At the same time, Mexican-American citizens, the majority of them, about 50%, right after 9/11, they responded to a poster saying their primary loyalty was Mexican. Some of them, about a quarter, said that their primary loyalty was Hispanic. Only 18 to 20% said their primary loyalty was American. That is a very serious business. These are people who are citizens of the United States and who are telling pollsters their primary loyalty is Mexican. Those people should not be citizens of the United States. If you're a citizen, your primary loyalty should be to that country, not to some other country.
So you think that, if I can just interject this question, that dual citizenship of all sorts should really be eliminated?
I think it's like bigamy. But certainly when you have a majority of people from some other origin saying that, yes, their primary loyalty is not just to a country that's 10,000 miles away. Their primary loyalty is the one that's just across the border. That's a very dangerous situation. You have plenty of Mexicans, intellectuals and activists as well, talking about the very real possibility of the southwestern part of the United States being broken off from the United States and becoming a Hispanic entity. Are we supposed to completely ignore that? Are we supposed to think, oh, how charming, fine, let's just let New Mexico and Texas and California depart from the United States? No, that's known as an invasion, and it's an invasion mentality that brings that kind of thinking to the southwestern part of the United States. We have every reason and every right to oppose it.
Oscar, what do you think about that? Surely you've heard that concept of invasion. What are your thoughts on that in particular?
I think that it's all fear. It's spreading fear when somebody makes that comment that it's an invasion. The whole Southwest United States at one point, that's all there was. There was the people that were governing at one point were Native American and Mexican. So things weren't terrible. Things didn't fall apart. Things were built in those days, and that's how this country was developed. So we have to appreciate that history and that contribution. There's many other studies. I mean, Mr. Taylor points out that surveys, data, people are saying, well, their loyalty is to Mexico, and I don't believe that. I think most of the people in this country from all different backgrounds, Korean, African American, Mexican, wherever they come from, once they're born in this country and they start paying taxes, their loyalty is with their quality of life, and like most Americans, their loyalty is going to be to protect their quality of life. And by the way, we should point out that Mexican American, as a group, in proportion to their group, have won more medals of honor than any other race fighting to defend this country. In fact, Mexicans have a long history of fighting in American wars. In the War for Independence, there were Mexicans who fought in the War of Independence to help liberate this country from Britain. And the Civil War, there were Mexicans who participated, to make sure the Union stayed in place. World War II, Vietnam. I mean, in Vietnam, 1970s, Latinos, Hispanics were only 5% of the U.S. population, yet made up 20% of all the casualties. So, I mean, it's been proven time and time again that Mexicans, Latinos, fight to defend this country with courage on the battlefield, and that right there is proof enough, that our loyalty is to this country, and we'll continue to defend this country. But one thing that will keep Latinos and Hispanics and Mexicans, whatever we want to call them, because it's a very diverse group, and I hate to use the term Hispanic because there's just so many different groups within what we call Hispanics. But it's very important to note that it's discrimination and racism and ethnocentrism, the type of ideology that Mr. Jared Taylor is promoting that keeps people divided along racial lines. And I think that's something that's just, I fear that much more than the so-called invasion. I fear hatred and discrimination much more because that has proven in the past that keeps people away from being loyal to this country when you discriminate against them. So we should be more concerned about racism and discrimination, and we shouldn't worry so much about the so-called invasion that's not happening.
Of course, Mr. Delatorre is not worried about an invasion. It's people like himself who think like him are pouring into the country. Of course he's not worried about what we would consider an invasion. If you imagine the shoe on the other foot, however, imagine that there were hundreds of thousands of poor whites pouring into Mexico, insisting on being instructed in English in the schools, buying up radio stations and broadcasting in English, not celebrating any kind of Mexican holidays, but celebrating 4th of July, talking darkly about breaking off part of Mexico and making it an all-white country. The Mexicans would not stand for that for a moment. They would consider it an invasion, which is exactly what it would be. You have to think fairly about these matters. As far as Mexican loyalty is concerned, at September 11th, at the patriotic high point in the United States, a Pew Hispanic Center study, this is a perfectly reliable organization that's ordinarily very sympathetic to Hispanic interests. It said that among American citizens of Mexican descent, 55% consider themselves Mexicans first. 25% chose primary identification as Latino or Hispanic. Only 18% consider themselves Americans first. I might add that every year, no fewer than 1,500 people, Mexican Americans who die in the United States, have their corpses shipped back to Mexico for burial. This is just in the Los Angeles area alone. 1,500 Mexicans want to be buried in the country they really care about. At the same time, there was a very famous soccer match between the U.S. national team and the Mexican national team in Los Angeles. The largely Hispanic fans, they cheered overwhelmingly for the Mexican team. They booed the American flag when the national anthem was played. They threw garbage at the American team. Their loyalties were clearly Mexican when there was a clear contest between Mexico and the United States. It's all very well to talk about Mexicans fighting for the United States in various wars. I think some of those numbers, I would like to see the substantiation for them. I've seen this claim before about Mexicans winning Medal of Honor in the highest per capita to their numbers. I was very surprised to hear that, and a friend of mine looked into that question. He found it's not true. That's a claim that's frequently made. It's not true.
Well, I'll tell you what, Oscar, why don't you go ahead and expand a little bit on what Jared had just mentioned, specifically referring to, I guess you could say, the circumstances and situations he just described, and maybe how all that plays into the big picture, because obviously, as we've seen time and time again, there are incidents and circumstances that can kind of taint everyone's opinion to the group. So do you think there's a difference between a situation at a soccer match like that, or in regards to the big picture? I mean, if most of the immigrants are people who want to be here because they love America and they want to be here because they want to be a part of something that maybe is better than their country, what do you say about those situations that really just those are the ones that make it into the media?
Well, look, all those conflict, a soccer match. I mean, that's trivial, you know.